He moves on to his premise 3, evidence that the cause of the beginning of the universe was personal. And so here's the kind of the kicker. Here's the one that you're probably most likely going to disagree with if you're not on the theist side. And so again, evidence 3 for the evidence for premise 3 he gives that the cause of the universe was personal derives from the fact that the ultimate laws of nature, time, space, and matter, did not exist earlier than the beginning of the universe. Okay. Well, that causes that are physical and are subject to scientific law presuppose time, space, and matter to exist. But since we are asking what caused time, space, and matter, the cause itself must be something other than each of these things. Okay. So it can't be time. So just continue on. It has to come about, right? So it doesn't just wait 30 seconds and then time will start. Okay, how do I wait 30 seconds before time comes about? Space has to be there. Well, the universe is ever expanding. Well, what is it expanding into? What did it expand from? Well, it's expanded from nothing. Okay, well, then how did it start? Well, it came from nothing, but again, you have something, so there's that. And then matter, for all the things that are in the universe to exist, all the elements that you learned on your elemental table, those all sprung from nothing, but you need those things in order to make everything else. So you just give me nothing and I'll give you everything. And so there you go. That's the traditionally held classical model of the creation of the universe. Again, nothing is there for no period of time, and then all of a sudden it exploded and we get everything. So that's the contention that you have to argue from if you're not a personal creation point of view there. Well, the universe's immaterial cause had to be then timeless, spaceless, and had power spontaneously to bring the world into existence as the first mover. Such a cause must have genuinely free will, and since only persons have free will, it must be a personal creator. Right? So could it not have been the case? Well, yes, the creation of the universe could not have been the case. It isn't a contingent thing. And so therefore you have to have the will to do it. And in order for something to have the will to do it, it has to be a person.
Right. And so what he's trying to get at here is that theism, to a certain extent, explains, the origin of the universe. And he's using this cosmological argument to do that. Well, what about science? Can it explain the origin of the universe? And this is his main issue here. No, it cannot, right? And so he gives us 3 reasons science cannot, in principle, explain the origin of the universe. And we've kind of hinted at these already, right? So first, science explains one aspect of the universe, notice, by appealing to another aspect of the universe, right? And often by connecting the two, one aspect to the other aspect, by subsuming them under a law of nature. So you have this thing and you have this thing, and they're connected by some law of nature. And so he says scientific explanations presuppose then that the universe has to exist in order for those explanations to be employed in the first place. So you have to assume that something is there already in order to make a scientific explanation, is what he's suggesting here. Mm-hmm. And thus a scientific explanation cannot be used to explain the very thing, the universe, that must exist before scientific explanation can even get off the ground.
Right. Well, second, the scientific explanations apply to ongoing temporal states and changes of states. Both are events of various things according to relevant laws. And so scientific explanations presuppose time. Events are temporal episodes, and so no sense can be given to the idea of a timeless event and the reality of events. So again, think about playing pool, right? There was a time before the 8-ball was in the pocket. Well, what was that time? Well, it was on the table. And there was a time before that where they were all commingled together with the other solids and the other stripes. And then all of a sudden the cue ball hit it. Well, what was there before the cue ball? Well, there was the stick. And then, so you keep going back and back to all these events. What was the effect? Well, the effect was the breaking of the triangle of balls. And that was done through the cue ball. And before that, it was the power put into to the stick. And before that, it was the food that the person consumed in order to have it. And so all these things are cause and effects. Well, you can't appeal to one without appealing to another. And so you have to have this initial first cause, or again, you have this actual infinite event that you need to appeal to. So we know that's not the case philosophically. And so there's no of this timeless event thing that you can apply to and say, well, the universe just always is. It's always been expanding and contracting, heat, death. But how do you have an explosion when all of its used up and the heat death of the universe happens. Well, you need to put more energy into it again. So again, even from the scientific claims of these things that they say, no, this is going to be the case. We have to worry about it in 30 billion years of the heat death of the universe or however long it is. Once you appeal to it, you go, oh, no, that's not the case. And so I think later on in the chapter, he talks about this changing cab fallacy, which I really like. So they hold on to it until you bring up a portion of it that would speak against their position, and then you drop it and say, no, that's not what we mean. Or
let me out of the cab. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, okay, from here, two things follow from this. For one, science will never be able to explain the first event, the beginning of the universe. Again, that's not to knock science, but it's to say that science can't do this, and so we don't ask the fish to climb up the tree. Because to do so, it would have to appeal to a prior event and a law connecting them. And it can't do that, so it can't. It is impossible for science to do that. But in this case, the origin of the universe would no longer be the first event. The prior explanatory event would be. But then to explain the first event, one would need to postulate another prior event, and a vigorous regress would happen. If you don't have that, again, the actual infinite, not possible philosophically, and so science cannot explain it. So what can explain it? Well, let me tell you about this guy in a book, and he wants you to know him.
Yeah. He says, for another thing, since scientific explanation is ties one event to another via a law, such explanations presuppose, notice, time for those laws to be applicable. And thus, again, science cannot explain the origin of the very thing, time, that must exist before scientific explanations can be proffered in the first place. All right. So again, it doesn't explain time in terms of these events happening. And so that's his second hit on this. Thirdly, then he says, coming into existence, he tells us, is not a process, but an instantaneous occurrence, right? And so something either does or does not exist, period, he tells us. And so it follows that apart from the creative activity of God, there can be, in principle, no reason, no explanation for why one thing, say the universe, popped into existence as opposed to another thing. Science can only be applied to transitions of one thing into another. But coming into existence is not a transition.
Right.
And so science, he tells us, cannot in principle explain the coming into existence of the universe from nothing.
Yeah, if we just added that last electron to the bucket that was everything in the universe, then all of a sudden it pops into the universe. No, that's not the case. So